Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel, Counting from Caleb. My name is Ryan and this is my very first video. In it I will show you why we believe the time of the last 7 years of this age, or Daniel's 70th week, will be from 2024 to 2031, and how God's year of wrath and recompense will be the final year of this 7-year period. First off, I'd like to give a shout out and many thanks to my friends Nelson Walters and fisherman Sam Fulcher for the encouragement in this endeavor. Sam and I have done a ton of collaboration with this, and I believe we've produced some amazing discoveries that you will hopefully find eye-opening. In this video, I'm going to explain my hypothesis that Israel is given 70 jubilees of time, or a 70 times 7 times 7 window from when God gave them their inheritance of the Promised Land, starting the harvest cycle, to entering the millennial kingdom at the 70th Jubilee, when the title deed of the earth was returned to its rightful owner, the Lamb who was slain that is worthy. This time frame encompasses 3,430 years, which equates to 490 weeks of years, or shabuim in Hebrew, and 70 total Jubilee years. I'm going to show you that it was not upon entry into the land when the clock started for these 70 Jubilees, but when inheritance was given to Caleb and the tribes of Israel, starting the harvest cycles that God uses for his timepiece. The timing of this inheritance is the key to unlocking the appointed time to the final 7-year period to the end of this age, and the final Jubilee returning creation to its rightful owner, and crowning our King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah. This is the complete 70 Jubilees timeline. I know it's very busy and looks complicated, but I'm going to break it down and hopefully make it easy to understand. If you look at the very end of this timeline, on the right, the 70th Jubilee in yellow is set to begin on the 10th day of the 7th month, or Yom Kippur 2031. This would be at the completion of the final 7 years, or the 490th week of years, lasting from the fall of 2024 to 2031. So time could be very short. The starting point for the 70 Jubilees is when Yahweh gave Caleb and Israel the inheritance of their land, starting the clock at the harvest cycle. This is the reason my YouTube channel is named Counting from Caleb, as the timeline hinges on Caleb's inheritance that is given, allowing us to calculate the timing of this event. Even though Israel hasn't been in the land to maintain the harvest cycle consistently, it was this point of time that started the clock for the 70 Jubilees when God gave them their inheritance. Daniel 9:24 through 27 reads, 70 weeks are decreed for your people in your holy city, to stop their transgression, to put an end to sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. This timeline is the culmination of that time period given by Daniel in 70 weeks of Jubilee. Let's look at 2 verses that give us the timing of when the sabbatical cycles began. Leviticus 25:1-4 states, "And spoke Yahweh to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, and say to them, When you come into the land which I give to you, then the land shall keep a Sabbath to Yahweh. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather its fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land, a Sabbath to Yahweh." So the Sabbaths to Yahweh are preceded by 6 years of sowing and 6 years of pruning. Deuteronomy 26:1-2 says, "And it shall be, when you come into the land that Yahweh your God is giving to you as an inheritance, and you possess it and dwell in it, then you shall take some of the first of all the produce of the ground, which you shall bring from your land that Yahweh your God is giving you, and put them in a basket. Then go to the place where Yahweh your God will choose as a dwelling for his name." Here we see it is also after the land has been given as an inheritance. So the sabbatical cycles start after 6 years of sowing and 6 years of pruning, and after the land has been given as an inheritance. One of the terms I'll be using is the Hebrew word shabua, which is a grouping of 7, or heptad. This can be a grouping of days, weeks, years, etc. This is not just any random grouping of 7, though. It is 6 units of what is being counted, followed by and ending with a Sabbath, completing a week. For example, if we're counting years for a shabua, it would be year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the 7th would be a Sabbath year, completing 1 week, or a shabua of years. Whatever's being counted in a shabua always ends with a Sabbath, creating a week of those units. The Feast of Shavuot, meaning Feast of Weeks, consists of 7 weeks, or shabua of days. The counting for these weeks begins the day after the weekly Sabbath following Passover, which is the first day of the week, and is the feast of the wave sheaf barley offering, or first fruits. Following first fruits, we count 7 shabua, or 49 total days, or 7 times 7 from that point, to the 7th Sabbath. Following the 7th sabbatical day is the Feast of Shavuot, or Pentecost, as it is also known. That occurs on the 50th day, also being the first day of the week following the 7th Sabbath day. This Feast of Weeks represents the correct way to count for the Jubilee cycles, as I will show. When we group 7 shabua, or weeks of years, together, we get what's called a Jubilee year. The big deal about the Jubilee year is that the land is returned to its original owner in this year, and is the reason the end of the age is completed with a Jubilee, as this is when the title deed of the earth is returned to the Creator of heaven and earth. The Jubilee follows the 49th year as the 50th year, but is also counted as the first year and the next Jubilee cycle. What's really interesting about the timing of the announcement of Jubilee is that it occurs in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, and because the Jubilee year is the 50th year, and also the first year in the Jubilee cycle, it is 49 years between Jubilee years. So if we multiply that out, it's 7 times 10 times 49, and equals 3,430, the exact number of years in 70 total Jubilees, and the number of years from the beginning of Israel's harvest cycle to entering the millennial kingdom. I will show you how this is the 7th month in a future video. When we compare the Feast of Shavuot, meaning weeks, with the Jubilee cycle, they match each other perfectly, placing the Feast of First Fruits and Shavuot 49 days apart from each other, and in the same exact location the Jubilee year occurs. The difference is the Jubilee is 7 weeks of years, while Shavuot is 7 weeks of days. Both First Fruits and Shavuot are the first day in the week, and the week is uninterrupted, showing the Jubilee as both the 50th day and the first day. This is why the Jubilee is a 49-year cycle and not a 50. The date of the Exodus is well documented and calculated to be in the year 1446 BC. 1 Kings 6:1 states, "And it comes to pass in the 480th year of the going out of the sons of Israel from the land of Egypt, in the 4th year, in the month of Ziv, it is the 2nd month of the reigning of Solomon over Israel, that he builds the house for Yahweh." This would place the laying of the foundation of the temple by Solomon in the 480th year, or 479 years plus a month, which is 967 BC. This is also supported by the excellent documentary named Patterns of Evidence by Tim Mahoney, and I encourage you to watch it if you haven't already. The timing of the reign of Solomon and the building of the temple does follow documented historical records of this event, with an established date of 1446 BC for the Exodus, and a corresponding match for the year of the building of the temple. We have a start point for our timeline and can build from there. I will go into further detail regarding the timing of the completion of the temple and its association with the Shabua cycles in a future video. Calculating Caleb's and Israel's timing of inheritance is key in discovering the correct sequence for the sabbatical and Yovel, which is Hebrew for Jubilee. During the period from entering the land to receiving the inheritance of the land, Yahweh destroyed 7 nations in Israel's conquest, as is noted in Acts 13:19. During this period, the land endured war and was not a time for cultivating. Without a 6-year period of sowing and reaping, the Shabua cycle count could not begin. To find the timing of inheritance, we count from when Moses sent the 12 spies into the land, and 10 of the 12 came back with a bad report. Only Caleb and Joshua came back with a positive report. This occurred in the 2nd year, approximately a year and a half after the Exodus, and tradition holds that the bad report was received on the 9th of Av, or the 9th day of the 5th month. If the massive grapes that the spies brought back with them are an indication of the time of the year for the harvest cycle, and it was at the end of the 40 days they spied out the land, it would correspond to the time when they were fully ripe in the land of Canaan in late summer, and would align with the timing of the 9th of Av. Joshua 14:6 through 14 is where we find the answer to the timing of inheritance. After the tribes of Israel had received their land inheritance, Caleb comes to Joshua and reminds him that he is due his inheritance of Hebron, which was promised by Moses. He then goes on to say that he was 40 years old when he went to spy the land in the second year after the Exodus, which would be 1445 BC. He then says, since that date, it has been 45 years and now he is 85 years old. So if we add 45 years to 1445 BC, we end up at 1400 BC for the year of inheritance. This would allow for sowing of the land to begin in the fall of that year, beginning the 7-year harvest cycle, or shabua, with the first observed sabbatical year for the land occurring in Tishri 1, 1394 BC. In the slide you can see that each block represents a year, and it is 40 years from the Exodus to entering the Promised Land in 1406 BC. From the Spy's Bad report in year 2, it is 45 years to land inheritance in 1400 BC. At this point, I'm going to introduce the Hebrew year, as they are calculated from fall to fall, following the harvest cycle. They don't use BC or AD, making them easier to follow. The year begins with sowing of the land, and this occurs in the month called Tishri, which is in the fall. The month of Nisan occurs in the spring, and Nisan is when reaping of the harvest begins, when the barley is aviv, or ready for harvest in this month. Because the year lasts from fall to fall, if we compare it to our Western calendar, it actually covers 2 of our years, as our year changes in January, so we need to keep this in mind. This is just a simple explanation to introduce the Hebrew year into the equation. I will continue to use both side by side for those that prefer either or. I will now show you the timing of inheritance in the year that it occurred. Again, the spies were sent out in the second year following the Exodus, which would be after the month of Nisan in 1445 BC. And also before the month of Tishri in 1445 BC. This 6-month window is where the inheritance of the Promised Land occurs 45 years later, between the month of Nisan and Tishri 1400 BC. This allows the sowing of the land to begin Tishri 1, 1400 BC, or Hebrew year 2362. After 6 years of sowing and reaping, the first observed sabbatical year would start Tishri 1, 1394 BC, or 2368 on the Hebrew calendar. To get the anchor point for counting sabbatical years, the Hebrew year 2361 is used. Adding multiples of 7 to this date will give us the correct sabbatical year from that point. For example, counting 497s, or 70 times 7 times 7, which is 3,430 years from 2361, has us arrive at the year 5791, or Tishri 1, 2030, beginning the final sabbatical year of the end of the age. Comparing the inheritance of the land to the Feast of Shavuot, we see the day representing the weekly Sabbath of Passover as the year when inheritance of the Promised Land was received by Caleb and the tribes of Israel. This is also the day Yeshua rose from the grave at the end of the weekly Sabbath. Sowing the land began on the day represented by first fruits, followed by 6 years of sowing and reaping, leading to the first observed sabbatical year. This also shows the 49 years of counting to the first Jubilee. Here are the 70 Jubilees of time from inheritance to the end of the age. This shows inheritance occurred in the year prior to the starting of the harvest cycle in 1400 BC, or 2361 on the Hebrew calendar. If we add 3,430 years to that date, which is 70 times 7 times 7, or 49 times 70, we end up in the fall of 2030 on our calendar, or Tishri 1, 5791 on the Hebrew calendar. This would be the year of the 490th sabbatical year, being the final sabbatical of the 70th Jubilee. Being that this sabbatical year precedes a Jubilee year, its length is 1 year and 10 biblical days long, lasting from Tishri 1, 2030 to Tishri 10, 2031. This 1 year and 10 days matches the same time period that Noah and his family were in the ark and protected from God's wrath during the flood. This is the year of wrath and recompense that Yeshua left out of his reading of Isaiah 61 in his first coming, proclaiming the acceptable year of Yahweh. Following this sabbatical year, on Yom Kippur is when the 70th Jubilee is proclaimed, and the title deed to the earth is returned to its original owner, ushering in the 1,000-year Messianic kingdom of our King of Kings. This is the entire 3,430 years placed in 70 Jubilee squares. Within each square are 7 weeks of years, or 49 years per block, equating to 70 times 7 times 7. With this representation, you can see how the Jubilee matches the Feast of Shavuot exactly, placing it in the first year of the 49-year block and also counted as the 50th and first into the next block of 49 years. This would be 70 Jubilee cycles in a row, mirroring the feast of Shavuot, as each year represents a day. This is one individual box of a Jubilee week, or weeks of years, making a shabua of weeks of years. Remember that a shabua is a grouping of 7 units, ending with a sabbatical of those units, making a week. In this case, we have 7 weeks of years, making the 7th week of years the sabbatical. So if we again look at the entire 3,430 years, or 70 Jubilee cycles, it produces 70 total sabbatical weeks of years, the 70th sabbatical being the 70th week of Daniel, ending with the final year as the day of the Lord, and year of wrath and recompense. This is the 70th block of 7 times 7 years that begins with the 69th Jubilee year. As we've learned, this is the 70th shabua of weeks of years, making this final week of years the 70th sabbatical week, or Daniel's 70th week. This week is calculated to start October 4th, 2030 on Yom Teruah and end September 28th, 2031 on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur 2031 would then begin the 70th Jubilee year and start the 1,000-year Messianic kingdom. The 7th year of this 7-year period preceding the 70th Jubilee is what is known as the Day of the Lord, as each year represents a day in the Feast of Weeks. So if my theory is correct, we are very, very close to the start of the final 7-year period. I will go into more detail in future videos explaining how these dates were achieved. Remember in Daniel 9:24 through 27 that 70 shabuim, or weeks, are decreed. We've learned that a shabua is a grouping of 7, with the 7th being a sabbatical. I've postulated to you that the 70 weeks of Daniel are weeks of years, making each set of 7 times 7 years a week. So 70 Jubilee cycles would be 70 weeks of years, or shabuim. The 490th week of years would complete the 70th week, representing the sabbatical in the final shabua. There is so much that I haven't begun to cover in the timeline, but I didn't want to overload you showing you everything all at once. I will continue going down that road with future videos if you're interested, and will hopefully show you that God has a clock to the end of the age, and His timing is uninterrupted. He has declared the end from the beginning, and as you will see, historical events follow His timeline to give us validation that He is in control of everything. Again, this is just my theory, and I could be wrong, but I wanted to share with you what I've put together and the excitement I have in doing so, and let you make up your own mind. To Yahweh be the glory, and we eagerly look to the return of our King of Kings, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah. Time is very, very short, my friends. Thank you for watching.